In the early hours of a quiet morning in Bradford, emergency operators received a call that would soon turn into one of the most horrifying incidents the city had seen in years. Flames were rising from a family home. A mother and 3 children were trapped inside. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but what they would discover inside the burned-out house would leave an entire community in shock. Because this wasn't just a tragic accident. Investigators would later uncover something far more disturbing. A fire that wasn't meant to destroy a house. It was meant to destroy a family. Tonight on RedCall, we examine the chilling case that unfolded in Bradford and the emergency call that marked the beginning of a devastating crime.
Bradford is a city in West Yorkshire, England. Known for its strong community and diverse population, it's a place where people often know their neighbors and look out for each other. Like many cities across the UK, most neighborhoods are quiet, ordinary places where families live their daily lives. But on one street in Bradford, an unimaginable tragedy was about to unfold. In August 2024, one quiet residential street would suddenly become the center of a major emergency response. At around 2 a.m., residents began noticing something unusual: thick smoke drifting from a house on the street. Within minutes, flames started to appear in the windows. By the time firefighters arrived, the house was already engulfed.
Firefighters rushed inside the burning property, but the conditions were extremely dangerous. Smoke filled the staircase. The heat was intense. Visibility was almost zero. As the fire was finally brought under control, investigators began examining the scene. The victims were 29-year-old Bryony Gawith and her 3 young children. Dennisty, aged 9, Oscar, aged 5, and Aubrey, just 22 months old. They lived together in a home on Westbury Road in Bradford. Friends and neighbors described the family as close-knit and loving. Bryony was known as a devoted mother whose children were the center of her life. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic house fire. But very quickly, detectives noted something that changed everything. This fire had not started accidentally. Someone had started it. As detectives began piecing together the events leading up to the fire, they uncovered a complicated personal history involving relationships, tension, and conflict.
Detectives expanded their search. More cameras, more angles, more footage. They tracked the suspects' movements across the city. Where had they come from? Where had they gone afterward? Every camera told part of the story. And slowly, a route began to form. Then came one of the most critical pieces of evidence. Earlier that night, the suspects had stopped at a petrol station. CCTV from the station showed a man purchasing fuel in a container. The timing matched perfectly. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. The fire had been prepared in advance. With the CCTV evidence in hand, detectives began identifying the individuals involved. It didn't take long for one name to emerge. A man with a direct connection to the family. a man whose relationship with one of the victims had recently ended. That name was Shiraz Ali. As investigators dug deeper into his background, a motive began to take shape. Behind the scenes, tensions had been building. Bryony's sister, Antonia Gawith, had recently ended a 7-year relationship with a man named Shiraz Ali. Prosecutors would later say the relationship had become abusive. After the breakup, Antonia moved into Bryony's home for safety. In the early hours of August 21st, 2 men traveled toward Westbury Road. Prosecutors later told the court they had purchased petrol earlier that night. The plan, they said, was revenge. Just before 2 a.m., they arrived at the house. According to the prosecution, the men forced their way inside the house. Petrol was poured around the property, and moments later, the fire was lit. The flames spread quickly. Neighbors described hearing screams and seeing flames lighting up the sky.
One of those neighbors is Wayne Stevenson. He remembers exactly how it began. In the early hours of the morning, something unusual woke him up. It wasn't the sound of sirens. It wasn't shouting in the street. It was his dog. The dog had started barking. At first, Wayne thought it might be nothing, but when the barking didn't stop, he decided to step outside and check what was going on. As he opened his back door, he heard something that instantly made his heart race. A woman screaming. Moments later, he saw the flames. Without hesitation, Wayne jumped over the fence and ran toward the house, determined to help. He first tried to get through the back door, but the heat was already unbearable. The fire had spread too quickly. So he ran around the side of the house, hoping to find another way inside. That's when he heard a woman shouting in desperation, "My sister is in there, with her kids!" Wayne tried the front door next, but by then the fire had grown even stronger. The heat pouring from the house made it impossible to get inside. There was nothing he could do.
Emergency services were called immediately. Fire crews arrived quickly, but the blaze was already out of control. Inside the house, Bryony and her 3 children were trapped.
Outside, neighbors stood in shock, watching the desperate rescue attempt unfold. Wayne remembers standing in the garden as firefighters began bringing people out of the house. And then he saw the children. At that point, he later said, "I just dropped to my knees." What he witnessed next would stay with him forever. He described it as the worst thing he had ever seen in his life. But the trauma of that night wasn't limited to the neighbors who watched helplessly outside. It also had a profound impact on the firefighters and emergency crews who responded to the blaze. Bradford District Commander Benji Bush was among those who attended the scene. He later described the flames as extremely intense, explaining that firefighters immediately realized they were facing a very serious fire. "This is the sort of thing firefighters talk about afterwards," he said. "Could we have done anything better? Could we have done anything more?" Those are questions emergency crews often ask themselves after incidents like this. But Commander Bush acknowledged that this was an exceptionally difficult situation. This particular incident, he said, was a very challenging house fire.
Investigators quickly determined the fire had been deliberately started. CCTV footage showed 2 men approaching the house shortly before the blaze. The investigation rapidly focused on Shiraz Ali and an accomplice. At Doncaster Crown Court, prosecutors laid out the full story.
He knew that the children lived with their mother. He was so full of hatred for Bryony and so determined that if he could not have a relationship with Antonia, then no one else would.
They argued the attack was motivated by revenge and jealousy following the breakup with Antonia Gawith. The jury found Shiraz Ali guilty of 4 counts of murder and the attempted murder of Antonia. In March 2026, the judge handed Shiraz Ali a whole life prison sentence. This means he will never be released. His accomplice, Callum Centerland, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 18 years. For the people of Bradford, the tragedy left a permanent scar. 4 lives were lost in a single night, a mother and 3 children. Their story is a reminder of how devastating violence can be, and how one act of revenge can destroy an entire family.
If you want more real emergency call stories, subscribe to RedCall, because sometimes the most terrifying stories begin with a single phone call.